Okay, welcome. This is Francesco Barbera, and I'm so pleased to be here with my old friend and uh, fellow explorer, Hylke Faber. Uh, Hylke and I met some years ago at a time in my professional life where I had really done a lot of work on the personal level in executive coaching and kind of personal development work, and I was exploring whether to transition out of corporate law into that arena. And Hilke was very helpful to me personally in that transition, and we got to spend a lot of time together in some trainings and so forth. And ultimately, he continued down the executive coaching and leadership development route, and I continued down my corporate law route. Uh, but in the intervening years, he's done some fantastic work in that arena, and I really so pleased to have him here for the purpose of introducing my clients and community to what he's doing and the work, his book that he's written, and the perspective that he has on leaders and organizations and how they can what holds them back and what how they can better access their wisdom and depth and authenticity as leaders and how organizations can maximize their potential. So, welcome, Hilke. Thank you again for being here.
And it's great to be here, Francesco. It's really nice to see you again.
Yeah, it is. Um, so, just by way of, I thought I would share at least a little bit about. Well, maybe actually, I'll turn it over you to share a little bit about your journey from. I know that you worked at in the start of your career, you worked at some strategic consulting firms, some kind of big, sort of conventional, high-powered strategic consulting firms. But then you experienced a kind of shift, a personal shift that led to a professional shift. So I thought maybe you could kind of introduce our listeners to that before and after and what you saw and what it meant for you.
Great. Well, appreciate that. So if I think about it, like I was born on a farm in the Netherlands, and I remember from a very early age a very strong drive. So at some point after lots of gyrations, I ended up in New York City, and there I had this mantra of like, I'm going to make it really big. Like, I'm going to be the biggest, whatever it was. I'm going to be one of those owner of those tall buildings. That's how I'm going to do it. It doesn't even matter what I do. I just need to be big. And so I did have some interest in what I want to do. So I ended up in strategy consulting, which I love because I love the discipline of looking deeply into something and using our intellect together as teams and helping clients. I love that. And yet there was a part of me that said, not so sure about this. And the Cherokees have a saying about this, which goes like, listen to the whispers so you don't have to hear the screams. So I would say the first few decades of my life were lots of screams that I just ignored. The whispers weren't even visible or tangible to me. So I was there in New York working as a strategy consultant. I was promoted very fast. I had lots of clients, lots of money, lots of first class flights to all kinds of areas in the world. And yet something in my gut says, And I kept ignoring it and I kept ignoring it. And at some point I developed asthma, so I couldn't breathe very well. And then after that, I started to develop insomnia. So I couldn't sleep anymore. And that was, you could say, a showstopper because, you have kids, so you know probably about sleepless nights. Some people have kids, know about sleepless nights. But not sleeping for a few days and sometimes a week at a time was just a completely maddening experience.
Yeah, that is rough.
And so during one of those sleepless weeks, I got to this place of, I can't go on like this. This is not working for me at all. Like I'm falling apart. My friends are not working as well, my relationships are not working as well, and I can't sleep. My body is falling apart. So this is insane. I got to do something about this. And then I discovered meditation. It's like as soon as I kind of set that intention, like I want to do something about this, I discovered meditation. And that changed everything because after 1 hour of meditation, I could sleep again.
No
And,
kidding.
and you can imagine that was like a big thing for me. And then I discovered meditation wasn't only leading me to better sleep, it was also like helping me to go in, you could say, to a place of like, who is this guy? Who is this guy? What is he really about? Is he about the having all these big things and being this big ego? I started to understand what that word meant at the time. Or is there something underneath? And I discovered there was something underneath me which was about being present or like love, peace, like words that kind of you can't really describe what they are, but I noticed there was something deeper inside of me. And that became a turning point for me because I was like, okay, if I can access that, then I need to access that all the time. So I thought I'll become a monk, which I decided in the end not to do that, and started to say, how can I bring this energy and this wisdom and compassion and peace that I start to access when I go into places where most people spend most of their active lives, which is at work. So I became a facilitator and coach. So that was, I think, in retrospect, a big shift. And it wasn't like that solved everything. And it was a point, like was a fork in the road. Like, okay, you need to go this way, not that way.
So you began then as you kind of personally deepened, you then kind of like you reoriented your professional life from you're still working with organizations, but you started, you could say, working with them on a different dimension
Yeah.
from working with them on strategy, the strategic pieces, uh, and those sort of, let's call it, external pieces to uh, the shift inward. Is
Yes.
that a fair summary?
That's a fair summary. That's a fair
Yeah.
summary. Yeah.
Now, you now have your own, coaching and leadership development firm, Constancy, as well as you do a lot of train the trainer work around. You wrote a book called "Taming Your Crocodiles." Yeah,
Hmm.
and um, can you just share like what um, if you had to describe the essence or the heart of the work that you do at Constancy and what you share in your book, how would you do that?
So it's a bit like I described in my personal journey. So a crocodile is simply a metaphor for our conditioning, and specifically our fear-based conditioning, our contracting conditioning, the conditioning that keeps us small, the thoughts, the mindsets, all the stuff that keeps us small. We can call that the crocodile. So taming your crocodiles is about helping us to become aware of that and make a different choice, so we can lead individually and as teams and as organizations from this more conscious place. Einstein has this quote, which is one of my favorite quotes, which is, problems cannot be resolved from the same level of consciousness that create a problem. So the work that I do with Constancy and also with Growth Leaders Network is to help leaders to become aware of what blocks their consciousness or what blocks their wisdom, their effectiveness, their oomph, their being able to get to the place of insight or being able to have the good conversation. What blocks that? Because what I find is the more you are able to articulate that, the more you're able to sort of name this crocodile, the more you're able to tame it. And then these like leadership competencies, you could say, that you all need to run a firm, like hold people accountable or set a vision or be a role model or listen well. They almost happen spontaneously because they're like deep qualities that are innate to us. I always think that leadership development is much more about unlearning than actually learning. So we're unlearning, and leadership actually comes from the word leith, Middle English, Leith, which means to die. So as a leader, we learn to die our crocodilian ego identity so we can come more, so that our true essence, you could call that our owl, we call that our owl as a symbol, comes more to the fore. So
An
that's
owl is
what
a
we,
symbol. So it is like what you're describing is like a shedding away, a shedding of old or outmoded uh, beliefs or ways of thinking or ways of responding.
yeah, yeah. And what I'd like to do is so to make it very unsophisticated, because anything can become like some kind of egoic, look
Hmm.
at me kind of endeavor. So we train people with this question: who's talking right now? Is it the owl or the crocodile? In the moment, like when I
Hmm.
say something, when I think something, when I respond to something, who's talking right now? Who's writing this email? The
Yeah.
owl, the crocodile. Who's holding back in the meeting? Is the owl, the crocodile? Who wants to be perfect? Is the owl, the crocodile? Who is that? And that little mirror, that mirror question, and other ways points us to sort of waking up to more truth.
Yeah. In my practice, I see, and also in my life, right, as a not just as a business owner, but as a husband and dad and friend and all the rest. I mean, um, I can see that there are just these responses that I have that I get very triggered and uh, imbalanced, and I'm kind of I'm operating in a way that is kind of uncomfortable and revved up, and I'm not at my best, and it is it's kind of disconcerting um, because it feels so involuntary. I mean, in a lot of ways, it just feels like uh, the of course I'm going to have this response. I mean, I'm facing these circumstances. This is a totally normal human response. Why wouldn't I respond this way? So I guess I have a few questions about the crocodile, right? Like, so what is it like? What do you see most commonly? What are some examples of like common crocodiles that you see that people that are like in the business world, you're working with leaders and so forth, what are they up against, and and how does it tend to play out? What
Mhm.
does a crocodile look like?
Yeah. So, so there are really simple ways that we've learned to survive, right? So
But not
our
really survive, right? I mean, not actually survive.
but the nervous system thinks that's it's actually surviving. It's egoic survival.
I say.
It's egoic survival, right? Which for the nervous system feels the same, or for
Hmm.
parts of our nervous system feel the same as real survival, like survival of our body, right?
Right. Okay.
So it starts very early. Like, so one of the first crocodiles is they got to like me, and then I get to school and I got to do it perfect,
Hmm.
and then I got to be better than others, and then I want to be special, and then I want to be in control of things, and then I want to have certainty all the time, and then I want to dominate over others, or just the other way,
Yeah. But
all of
people
these are.
don't but people don't know that they have this going on, though. I mean, it's like it's sort of invisible. Like, you develop
Yeah,
something like, I need to be in control, but you're not thinking that all the time.
no,
You're just living it out and
yes,
creating havoc in the
yes. So
meantime.
so if you think about, like, how does that play out, right? So
Yeah, right.
these things, these crocodiles really come to the surface, you could say. They become like very uncomfortable when we have a challenge, because in a challenge we need more of our potential, you could say, to actually work for us.
Okay.
Like when we're eating an ice cream by ourselves, even though for some of us that may be challenging, um, it's it's relatively straightforward. We won't be as bothered by our crocodiles, probably, unless it's like, I need to have the perfect ice cream. Why is it not this way? And I'm upset about the ice cream. But let's say we are trying to have a feedback conversation with somebody. Let's say we have somebody working on our team and we need to hold them accountable. That's a pretty high stakes conversation, right? So in that high stakes conversation, we might never have the conversation. Why? Well, who's talking? The crocodile, because the crocodile's thinking, well, they might not like it. So the crocodile that wants to be liked is being triggered. And right now I'm sitting in a meeting room that turned off the lights. So my
This is awesome.
crocodile that wants to do it perfectly is like, what's going on like here? So I'm going to wave my hand and see if the lights somehow miraculously start to turn on again. And if they're not, I'm going to move to a little to the wall here, which I'm going to do. So 1 second. Let me do this for a second. Give me 1 second.
Yep.
There you go. So, the crocodile wants to do it well. Really didn't like that to happen, right? It wants to have everything perfect. So in the feedback conversation, in the holding accountable conversation, I might then hold back. So because I don't want to hurt somebody's feelings, or I think I need to have it all under control and I need to do it perfectly. So I'm not going to say it because I'm not 100% sure. I'm not willing to share with the other person what I see, for example, right? Or I not only give the feedback, I also give a recipe to the person what they should do about it. So in other words, I'm trying to be sort of the special rescuer person.
Now,
Or
how do people know? Yeah, I mean, I could see that just like in an infinite variety of ways that we you can screw things up, so to speak. But how do you know? You said that one of the questions people can ask is, who's talking right now? Is it the crocodile or the owl? Like, and do we know the answer to that question on an instinctive level, or how does one know when the crocodile has taken charge?
So I was taught this way, like, if I'm not sure who's talking, I'm pretty sure it's the crocodile.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm not sure, it's like, oh, okay. It's some kind of thing. Now, if we want to look a little further, to me, the distinction between being driven by our conditioned self, a fear-based conditioned self, conditioning is not all bad, right? Because some of the conditioning helps me to navigate traffic, for example, or have a conversation with you.
Okay.
So the fear-based conditioning is like, I feel a kind of contraction, a sense of unease, in myself. It's like I'm not completely, like you said.
So there's a physical component. It's like a physical symptom.
Yeah.
And when you're feeling the contraction, you can wake up to it and be like, who's talking right now? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm Byron Katie, the wisdom teacher Byron Katie, who I know you would know well. And she has this question: is this absolutely true? Can you absolutely know it's true? And so we have this internal truth barometer. Like we know.
Right.
We know.
Right.
So to me, all it required is actually for us to stop, take a small pause,
and then we kind of reset. Like that's enough to help us reset.
Yeah.
Now we have a couple more minutes, unfortunately, but now your book is called Taming Your Crocodiles, right? And so there's this progression that's implied in that, like that there's a way to kind of get your arms around your conditioning and what does that process look like, and what is it that leaders can do to lead more consistently from their owl, so to speak?
Yeah.
And how do you help with that process?
So to me, Taming Your Crocodiles is a moment-to-moment practice. The great thing as leaders and as teams is that you can do it together because we reinforce each other. So how does it work? There are endless practices to do this. So in the book, Taming Your Crocodiles, I describe a few that I find very helpful. So one is for ourselves to just build awareness, moment to moment, right? Then underneath that, start to become curious about the patterns. Like, what are the patterns? Which types of crocodiles are more active in me? rather than others want. So for me, like a pleaser is a big one, and a perfectionist is a
Right.
big one. So we talk about that as different fear families, 7 fear families having to
Okay.
do with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So we become curious about mapping these, however you want to do that.
Hmm.
And then, you can use all kinds of tools like changing your self talk, asking this question, who's talking right now, doing the work by Byron Katie, meditating, having conversations about this as a team. And this is where it becomes really interesting to me. So this is where it becomes how we work with leaders and teams and organizations, because we create a culture, like we work on culture in organizations, in teams, where working on your owls and crocodiles becomes as normal as talking about profit and loss.
Right.
So how do you do that? Little tools like a check-in in the beginning of the meeting, where people say, "Hey, this is how I feel. This is how my crocodile might go into the meeting, and this is what my intention for the meeting is." So simply by being intentional together, you create an
Yeah, so
atmosphere where
it's
this
it's
happens.
it's like you creating it's like the process of gaining awareness and understanding in and of itself has these beneficial properties.
Yes,
It's just you're shining the light of attention and awareness and intention, and that's what you help people do, and
yeah,
that
yeah,
process is intrinsically helpful.
yes,
Thank
yes,
you.
yes.
That actually, I love the concreteness of that, and it makes perfect sense. So,
And then the one thing I'd like to say to that, so to me, it's not about learning all these tools.
right,
To
right.
me, it's about developing the muscle and the enthusiasm to continuously, while we're doing all these things, being a lawyer, building a firm, all these things, while we're doing this, developing this muscle to simultaneously and at times in pause to look at, hey, what's going on within me and within us as a collective.
Yeah. Um, yeah, the growth orientation, the learning orientation is key, is what you're saying.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Very helpful, Hilke. Thank you again for being here. I think this is based on my work, a hugely important direction for entrepreneurs to look in, because it is such it's the emotional demands that I find to be trickiest and most likely to lead entrepreneurs astray. So I think the work you're doing is profoundly important, and thank you for sharing it with our community. We'll be in touch.
You're very welcome. Pleasure to be with you.
Okay, thanks so much.